Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to our panel discussion today on the urgent need for immigration reform. I am honored to be joined here today by Ava Malona, Mira Coalition, Patricia Montez from Centro Presente, Margaret Shepherd, Framingham City Councilor, Jose Palma, Massachusetts TPS Committee, Yvonne Espinoza, Lawyers for Civil Rights, and Mei Hung, Chinese Cultural Connection. Thank you all for joining me for this discussion about the challenges facing our immigration system and the need to ensure that America can remain a beacon of hope for people around the world. A rich diversity of cultures, backgrounds, and experiences make our nation stronger. Immigrants are the fabric of our community, the backbone of our economy, and are at the forefront of innovation. But for years, our immigration system has been broken. It has been almost 2 decades since the last substantive immigration reform was signed into law, and our challenges have only grown since then. As immigrants and refugees continue to seek a better life in the United States, we need to create long-term solutions that respect the dignity and rights of immigrants and keep the American dream alive. House Democrats, working with President Biden and his administration, have led by the Congressional Hispanic, Asian, and Black caucuses, are committed to using every tool we have to provide relief to as many people as possible. Already in his administration term, President Biden has revoked the Trump order that aimed to exclude undocumented immigrants from the census, fortified and preserved DACA, reversed the Muslim ban, ended the so-called national emergency that Trump instated to justify construction of the border wall, established the Family Reunification Task Force, and rebuild refugee resettlement program, and much, much more. But our problems with immigration did not appear suddenly, and they can't be fixed with just a stroke of the pen. Hundreds of years of imperialism, interventionist foreign policy, and climate change have driven migration patterns beyond our current immigration system's abilities. That's why House Democrats have prioritized immigration reform in our work for the people. Already, we've passed the American Dream and Promise Act, which will provide a pathway to citizenship for 3 million DACA recipients, other eligible young immigrants, and TPS, temporary protected status recipients. For dreamers whose only home is America, certainty in their citizenship status is critical for their long-term success and mental health. We also passed the Farmwork Force Modernization Act to provide agricultural workers with a path to earn legal status while working in the US and to reform the temporary work visa program. People who grow and harvest the food we eat every day shouldn't be forced to live in the shadows, especially during this pandemic, when farm workers have risked their own health every day to keep produce on our tables. The least we can do is act to ensure they don't live in fear. But not only do we need to get these bills through the Senate, we also must do more to address the family and employment-based immigration systems, which include improved processes for high-skilled immigrants, easing backlogs and establishing labor exploitation protections, the creation of a pathway to citizenship for the 11 million people living here without documentation, reforms to our asylum and refugee systems, and family reunification. We know that immigration reform can't wait because it's about real people. It's about our neighbors and friends, and it impacts our communities. Children sent here alone for a better chance at success, refugees seeking shelter from violence and war, workers just looking to provide for their families. Behind the xenophobic rhetoric, the fear in the headlines, there are human beings suffering and waiting and wondering when they can live freely in the United States. I have traveled to the border, and I will never forget these experiences or the families that are looking to America for a better life. It's our job to remember each of them as we write policies that will allow them to achieve the American dream. So let's dive into the discussion with the expert panelists that we have on how we can make that dream a reality. And first, I'd like to introduce my friend, Ava Malona. Ava has served as president and CEO of the Massachusetts Immigrant and Refugee Advocacy Coalition since 2008. A native of Albania, she practiced civil and criminal law before becoming the youngest district judge ever appointed to Tirana's district court, where she served from 1989 to 1992. After immigrating to the US, she directed the Refugee Resettlement Program in central Massachusetts before joining MIRA in 1999, initially serving as Director of Policy and Advocacy, then as Deputy Director. She became Executive Director in 2008 and today is recognized both nationally and internationally as an expert and a leader on immigration policy and immigrant and refugee integration. Ava, I have been so fortunate to have your friendship and partnership over the years as we have fought for protections for DACA and TPS recipients. I would love to hear from you, your thoughts on the two immigration bills the House has just passed and why quick Senate action is so important. Thank you, Ava, for joining us here this morning.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Good morning, everyone. It's a privilege to be with you, Congresswoman, and my distinguished colleagues sharing the stage with you. And to the viewers, thank you so much for joining us in this amazing discussion. Congresswoman, I also want to thank you for your incredible leadership in Congress about these bills, but also generally speaking, and to the Massachusetts delegation for making immigration reform a priority. I am also a proud naturalized citizen that love America with all my heart, and working on immigration reform and immigrant integration um, at MIRA it has been really a privilege. As you know, MIRA is the largest immigrant advocacy institution in New England and has been around since 1987 when the last immigration reform bill passed under President Reagan that provided the path for 3 million workers to obtain their citizenship and be very much part of the fabric. And MIRA has been in the front lines for 34 years to really promote immigrant rights and immigrant integration. It's extremely important that we see integration and immigration reform as a two-way process, one by which the newcomers do everything that they can to economically, linguistically, civically, politically, and socially integrate into the life of our society, but also the receiving society provides the path for them to integrate and make it easier for them to be part of our fabric. Immigration reform, as Congresswoman articulated so beautifully, has been in the works for so many years, for 2 decades. And I think we are very close to really getting immigration reform done. The House Democrats and 9 Republicans stood up with the majority of the American people to pass the Farmwork Modernization Act and the DREAM Act. And these are two extremely important bills that will give a path to dreamers, over 3 million dreamers across the country who are our friends, our co-workers, very much part of the fabric. The DACA program for the last 7 years was one of the most successful integration programs in the world, I would say, not just in the country. So the moment has come that, Congress needs to act, Senate need to act immediately to get this issue resolved. Justice has been denied for too long, and dreamers are Americans in every sense of the way. They just need the papers. And there is bipartisan support. The House showed the way how both parties can work together to do what's right for the country and what's right for dreamers. The same thing with with the TPS holders. Their stories are very similar to the dreamer story. They are very much part of who we are. And one thing that we learned from COVID, as much as hard as it was and it still is, there is no recovery without immigration reform. There is no recovery without a path to citizenship for dreamers, for TPS holders, and for the 11 million across the country. It is time that really Senate acts quickly. I remember, Congresswoman, in another event that we were doing together prior to the elections, there were over 200 bills in McConnell's desk at the time, that the House passed, and those were blocked. The rhetoric was beyond what one can handle, and the conversation was about politics. I think time has come for us to talk about policy and why is it so important to pass immigration reform and to have a 21st century immigration policy for our country that is pro-family, it's pro-value, it's pro-economy, and really reflects the values who we are as a country, that America was built with the help of immigrants, and we are as strong as our people. And one of the things that I think people can talk about and can change the narrative is that immigrant workers are and were in the front lines, and they were the ones who kept the economy going. And what they need is just the proper paper so they can have a peace of mind and better integrate in our society. Here in Massachusetts, 20% of the workforce, it's made of immigrants, and there are 71,900 undocumented essential workers who were in the front lines, who are in the front lines. I recall the story of our friend Nerva that was part of our business immigration coalition, who stated that she was working 3 jobs in the healthcare industry, and she's also studying healthcare management. And Nerva's story is the story of hundreds and thousands and millions in Massachusetts and across the country. So time has come that our dysfunctional immigration system get updated. It meets the modernization of the 21st century, and it addressed not just the area of dreamers and farm workers, but also the 11 million that are eager to be on a path to citizenship, looking also into the family immigration, business immigration, asylum, and also detention. Detention should not be the norm, should be the exception. And we are the greatest country on earth. We learned so much for COVID that if we want recovery and we want to survive this, we are in this together. And, immigrants also are an asset to our country. They contribute 1 trillion in GDP and 340 billion in taxes every year. There were immigrants also who helped get the vaccine. So let's think about, America, it's all of us together, and let's keep the us moving forward. And my hope is being an advocate for immigration reform. I also see myself being as an advocate for democracy. So the sooner we provide the path to legalization for all American workers in the country, the stronger our democracy will be. This is a moment that we cannot wait any longer. The American people need immigration reform, and even the Fox polling right after the election stated very clearly that 71% of the voters for President Biden want immigration reform, and over 65% of the voters who voted for the other candidate are for immigration reform. So the bipartisan support is there, the support of the American people is there, and it's a matter of justice that has been delayed for far too long, and our country needs action. Thank you for the opportunity, Congresswoman. I look forward to working with you. Mira, look forward to working with President Biden and pushing and our wonderful senators of Massachusetts, as well as through the other, coalition members. We're working in 37 states to really push a 21st century immigration policy for our country.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Ava, for all your work and leadership and vision and compassion. We are thrilled to have you here and as always to be your partner. Now I'd like to introduce Patricia Montez. Patricia is the Executive Director of Centro Presente, one of the longest standing immigrant-led immigrant rights organizations in Massachusetts. She has previously worked in public relations and communications in both government agencies and non-governmental organizations in Honduras, as well as in television production for over 6 years. Patricia is a recognized immigration rights leader and a tireless advocate for just economic and social policies, including a just U.S. immigration policy. She has served as the board chair of the Boston Women's Fund. She's also been a member of the International Human Rights Mission to Mexico and Central America, which has documented the violations of human rights of immigrants in their travels from Central America to the United States. Patricia, we are so glad to have you with us. We know your time is short this morning. We would love to hear your perspective on the root causes of migration and how we need to consider this context as we approach immigration reform. Thank you again.
Congresswoman, thank you so much for organizing this space and also for your leadership, not just about immigration reform, but protecting the human rights, especially of women and girls. That is extremely important for us. As you mentioned, for Centro Presente, is extremely important to talk about, not just about the crisis that we're facing right now at the US and Mexican border, but also the crisis beyond the border, the crisis that Central American countries have been facing for a very long time. Our organization, Centro Presente, do organizing political advocacy in order to protect human rights of the Central American population. Most of our members have been coming to the Boston area from Central America since the 80s, when there were civil conflicts in countries like El Salvador that were displacing people during the 80s. And now, unfortunately, according to the UN, Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador are the 3 of the most dangerous countries in the region. So that's why a lot of people are coming to the US and Mexican border. I also want to let you know that for Centro Presente is a priority, definitely the immigration reform and the other bills that are at the House right now, and hopefully they will pass in the Senate. Thank you for your leadership. The Secure Act, the Dream and Promise Act are very important for Centro Presente. Since the beginning of temporary protected TPS, we have been doing a lot of work around that. Currently, we have more than 1,000 members of Centro Presente that are covered by TPS, but we also follow the leadership of our friend and colleague, Jose Palma, who is here. I'm so glad that Jose is here, who is actually a person who is protected with TPS, and he's, doing a lot of work at the national level in order to pass permanent residency for people protected with TPS. Another element that is extremely important for us is another bill that passed like a month ago, is the Honduran Human Rights and Anti-Corruption Act that was introduced in the Senate by 8 senators, including our 2 senators. So we're very glad that our 2 senators are supporting this bill. Why? As I said before, for Centro Presente, it is a priority to educate the general public, policymakers, the media, and other actors about the structural causes that force people to come to the United States. In our opinion, the crisis is beyond the border. The crisis is taking place in Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador. So we're glad that the Biden administration is taking in consideration the root causes of forced migration, and they are thinking about sending funding to these 3 countries. But it is very important for us to understand the deep crisis and historical crisis that Central American countries have been facing. And that's why we're supporting the Human Rights, Honduran Human Rights and Anti-Corruption Act, because we believe that it's urgent to understand the situation in the region and also reestablish the rule of law in countries like Honduras, for example. I want to emphasize the particular case of Honduras, because it's not just about extreme poverty, extreme violence. It's also the endemic level of corruption and impunity that these places are facing right now. And the Biden administration included that part in the immigration proposal. So we're so glad that for the first time in decades, this is the only administration that finally is talking about addressing the root causes of forced migration, specifically about people that are coming from Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador. We want to work with you and the other members of the Congress to make sure that the rule of law is respected in Honduras, that we are able to reduce corruption and impunity in these countries, in order to make sure that if you send money to these countries, that money is not going to be used to continue militarizing our societies, that money is going to be used to protect basic human rights of the Honduran people, of people of Guatemala and El Salvador. And of course, we also care about human rights of other migrants, but we talk specifically about Central Americans because according to the UN, 500,000 people try to cross the border every year. 400,000 of them are coming from Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador. Right now, we have 5 minors that are in detention. One of them is a little girl who was abused in El Salvador, and she's pregnant. Her mother is desperate. We have been supporting immigrants, giving financial support and giving food because the COVID situation. But we also are doing a lot of work in order to raise awareness about why people come. And we're going to continue doing it because that's our priority. Thank you so much. And the final thing that I want to say before I leave is that like a week ago today, the brother of the Honduran president was sentenced to life in prison plus 30 years because his activity on his narco activity for almost 10 years, more than 10 years. So it's not just about extreme poverty, corruption, and impunity. It's also narco activity in our countries of origin. So thank you so much for your leadership, for organizing this space, and for supporting us in order to make sure that not just human rights of migrants in the United States are being protected, but also human rights in our own countries of origin are being protected. Thank you, Congresswoman.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for joining us and for being such a champion for human rights and giving us context and understanding of some of the reasons and push for migration out of Central America. And we're so grateful to have you with us today and for your work. And now I'd like to introduce Framingham City Councilor, Margaret Shepherd. In 2017, Margaret made history as the first Brazilian American woman elected to a city council in the United States, right here in MA5. And after moving to Framingham from her native Brazil in 1992, Margaret began working alongside cousins as a babysitter and a house cleaner as she learned English. A year later, she started her own small business, which she still runs today. She has worked tirelessly to support and empower all of Framingham's immigrant communities, not just as a city councilor, but also in her personal capacity on the board of BRACE, as a commissioner on the Metro West Commission on the Status of Women, as chair of the Boston Brazilian American Citizen Council, and as co-founder of the Brazilians for Political Education movement. Margaret, it is great to see you and to have you here with us today. I'm hoping you can share some of your thoughts on what you have seen as some of the greatest challenges facing our immigrant communities, particularly as this pandemic has taken such a disproportionate toll on this population. Thank you, Margaret, for joining us.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Congresswoman, for inviting me for this panel, for this conversation. I'm so happy to be here. My family and I, as you said, we immigrated to Framingham 29 years ago. Until today, we have family members that are not documented because the legislation just do not allow any path for anyone to become legal other than getting married. And immigration process lasts sometimes over 10 years. Since the pandemic started, we all, my family, my community, we put our dreams on hold. We work together to fight a common enemy. And we fought ignorance, hunger, economic and health disparity, and death. We are succeeding on this task because we fought together, government and civil society, 24 hours a day. As we continue our way out of the pandemic, we also need to make sure to overcome the factors that make our fight so difficult. The lack of education. Science is not a political banner. It's a knowledge that needs to be shared with everyone. Economic disparity, poverty, hunger, no healthcare prevention, crowded housing are COVID fertilizer. And we have plenty of that on the immigration community. Social disparity. We need to embrace our diversity. We need to empower our community. And you ask, what's the next step to achieve the immigration reform that we dream so much? At local level, I think we need to do the same as we did during the pandemic. We need awareness and we need actions. We need to propose and support local legislation. In Framingham, I'm fighting to approve a welcome immigrants ordinance that will not only address undocumented immigrant issues, but all immigrants. We need to empower our immigrants and we need to guarantee they all have access to public service. We need to hold our elected officials accountable, calling for state legislations approval. Bills such the Community Safe Act, the Family Mobility and Work Act needs to be approved. We have the majority in the House, and we've been trying to approve those legislations for years. It's past due it. And we need to provide aid, health care, and food insecurity among undocumented immigrants and our low-income families. We shall not be that fragile for the next public health crisis. At the federal level, we need you to become 10 because you are doing an awesome work. You are advocating for all of us. I need to thank you and pray that you have the strength to continue your fight and lead us to success. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Margaret. It is such an honor and privilege to get to work with you on these issues around immigrants and social equity in Framingham and your reach far beyond. So thank you for your work. Thank you for being here. And next, I'd like to introduce Jose Palma. Jose is actually live at Freedom Square in Washington, D.C. I hope he's able to turn on his video, but he is the co-founder of the Massachusetts TPS Committee, coordinator of the National TPS Alliance, and one of the most prominent voices for temporary protected status holders in our country today. Born in El Salvador to parents who lost everything in the Civil War, he came to the US in 1998 at just 22 years old. Hurricane Mitch struck El Salvador that year, and a devastating earthquake followed in 2001. Recognizing how unbearable conditions had become, the US government granted TPS to Salvadorans. Jose and his wife now have 4 children, all US citizens. He graduated from North Shore Community College with distinction and got involved in advocacy through the student immigrant movement and Centro Presente. Jose served as political and organizing director for Neighbor to Neighbor from 2013 to 2016. He was a paralegal at Justice at Work, a legal firm specializing in workers' rights. And when the Trump administration began to phase out TPS, he decided to take action. Jose, thank you for joining us, for your leadership in advocating for permanent protections for TPS holders. We would love to hear more about your work and what the impact will be for our neighbors right here in Massachusetts when we reach final passage of the Dream and Promise Act. Thank you for joining us live from DC.
Good morning, and thank you, Congresswoman, for the invitation. I think for me, it is a pleasure to be here today because a few different reasons. One, it reminds me when we worked together when I was at Centro Presente moving the Secure Act for the first time in Massachusetts against that crazy program that we all know it doesn't work. But anyway, I am, as you said, I am from El Salvador. I am a TPS recipient, and I have been I will say a lucky person. I have been in very difficult moments and difficult decisions to make, but also I think it has given me strength to face the difficulties that comes eventually in life. I grew up in El Salvador in the middle of a civil war with my parents pretty much leaving the place where they were living with the only 2 kids they have at that moment because of the civil war, they were told, you stay here and get involved in the war or leave everything behind and you can just take your kids. My parents decided to take the 2 kids. One of them was me. I grew up with the dream of going to college and universities, but the situation in El Salvador didn't allow me. Seeing my 3 little sisters going in the same direction with difficulties to achieve their dreams, I eventually decided to look for that opportunity in the United States. I came in 1998. I went directly to Massachusetts. Somerville was my first place to live in Massachusetts. And since then, I have done different type of jobs, from cleaning and buildings in downtown Boston by doing milk delivery across the state and also moving to New Hampshire and also going to college and graduating with an associate degree of paralegal and at the same time raising a beautiful family of 4 US citizen kids. One of them is actually 20, another beautiful girl who's 15, and beautiful baby boy 5 and a 2 years old. That is actually the motivation to do everything I can at this specific moment that we were told you have 6 months to leave the United States and go back to your country. That was a decision that I will imagine any of you as a parents, you will say, I will do whatever I can, whatever it takes to defend my kids' future and to defend my family. I believe as a TPS recipient, I have been following every rule, which is every TPS recipient across the country has been doing the same. And the reason is simple. We have to renew TPS every year and a half. We have to go into background check and we have to go into different ways and how we have to be behaving very well in order to keep TPS. We also have been very happy and lucky that the TPS has allowed us to achieve some things, like for some TPS recipients, opening their businesses, for some of us going to college, for many TPS recipients buying homes, and many other things I can highlight. But I will tell you what we have done since the Trump administration came and telling us that we were supposed to go back after 22 years living, in my case, in Massachusetts. We, as a TPS community, got organized. We started a group in Massachusetts called Massachusetts TPS Committee. And at the same time, as you was mentioning, I was part in the structure of building a national network called the National TPS Alliance, which actually right now is holding a 43 days hunger strike to show the society that moving to permanent residency for TPS recipients, DACA recipients, and pretty much everyone should have the opportunity to apply for permanent resident is urgent. We are here raising awareness because we feel the urgency, despite many victories in court that is still protecting us down to October 4th. Our life continue in limbo. Some of us are thinking who's gonna continue paying our mortgage if we were to lose our immigration status and we were to be put in deportation procedure. Some of us are still wondering, like, will I be around to support my daughter when she's applying to college? And that is my story, but that's the story of 450,000 families across the country with 16,000 right there in Massachusetts. Salvadorian, Hondurans, Nicaraguans, Haitians, Nepalese, and I can go with the rest of the countries, but I want to say something else. I want to say that I am happy that the strategy is getting understood in Congress, because I believe we need a comprehensive immigration reform to protect everyone. But it's also true that due to the political climate and what's going on in Congress, if we were able to achieve something smaller, we can call it, but 4 million people protected is not that small. And for sure, it will guarantee to our immigrant community that the Democratic Party, our leadership is serious about the conversation and are taking every step possible to protect as many we can right now. And for sure, the commitment from everyone to continue organizing and working hard to protect everyone. I will imagine for many people that today talk bad about new immigrants, I am sure if they go back a few years behind history, I am sure their parents came with the same dream as we are right now, looking for a place where we can contribute to do this country even better, and for our kids to continue building this great nation as a country that can show humanity and that show the lead for others to learn how to treat everyone who's looking for support, and also to contribute to make it even better, which is what many of us are doing in this country. So I am happy to be with you all, because I think it's kind of like a reunion within friends, but also talking with others that are watching and sharing some real stories and showing some ways and how we can move forward to find some solutions. So I'll be here for more questions.
Jose, thank you so much. It is so appropriate that you are coming to us from Freedom Square in Washington, D.C. You are such a voice for freedom for TPS holders and really for each and every one of us. So thank you for joining us. Next, we are joined this morning by Yvonne Espinoza Madrigal. Yvonne is the Executive Director of the Lawyers for Civil Rights, an organization founded at the request of John F. Kennedy in the 1960s at the height of the Civil Rights Movement. Yvonne has filed and won dozens of life-changing and law-changing cases on a wide range of civil rights issues, including immigrants' rights and LGBT HIV equality. The National LGBT Bar Association has recognized him as one of the best LGBT lawyers under 40, and the Boston Business Journal included Yvonne in its top 40 under 40 list in 2018. He has received the Boston Bar Association's Beacon Award and the President's Award and the University of Pennsylvania's Martin Luther King Award in Social Justice. My goodness, a summa cum laude and Phi Beta Kappa graduate of the University of Pennsylvania. He received a Juris Doctorate from NYU School of Law. Yvonne serves on the board of the New England Foundation for the Arts and Eastern Bank. Yvonne, we are delighted to have you with us here today. We know attorneys have been on the front lines of fighting for immigrant communities. Please share with us some more about your work and changes you would like to see to ensure every individual has equal access to justice and fair treatment under law. Thank you for joining us.
Congresswoman, it is a pleasure to be here with you. I want to take a moment to thank you for your leadership and for convening us. I also want to take a moment to thank this distinguished panel for joining. As you mentioned, Congresswoman, we have been very busy, particularly over the past few years, holding back the worst excesses of the Trump administration through the courthouse. And so what we have done is repeatedly sued the federal government to stop the dismantlement of critical immigration programs that we have already heard during this conversation. For example, we sued to stop the dismantlement of temporary protected status, which is the program that my friend and colleague Jose Palma just described in great detail, a program that had existed for over 2 decades, as you heard him, over Republican and Democrat administrations alike. And yet it was under Trump that that program became dismantled for absolutely no good reason. Similarly, we have been fighting to maintain other immigration protections and programs like deferred and forced departure, DACA, and many other programs that have been in existence for a long time and that have never been controversial. Now that we are with a more immigrant-friendly administration, with the Biden-Harris administration, we really have an opportunity to focus on more affirmative measures, not just defending immigration programs, but creating immigration protections and relief along the lines of what you, Congresswoman, have been leading and describing as part of this conversation. And so I want to thank you for that. We are strong advocates for comprehensive immigration reform, for making sure that all immigrants who are in the position that Jose Palma just described, or who are dreamers and DACA recipients, that all these folks are able to find an appropriate way of moving forward. And this is critical here. We cannot have a conversation about stabilizing our families, our communities, and our economy if so many lives remain in immigration and legal limbo. It is critical for us to provide a pathway forward to stabilize these families. Just over the last couple of weeks, we have also seen the importance of taking affirmative measures. Just as the Trump administration was unwinding, it extended deferred and forced departure to Venezuelans, bringing them into a form of immigration protection. A similar approach should be taken with other countries, not just with Venezuela, so that we can avoid the crisis at the border. Another important remedy here moving forward is to make sure that immigrants have an opportunity to apply for immigration protection and relief in their home countries, so that they don't have to journey from Honduras, from El Salvador, from Guatemala to the border with Texas or Arizona or California. If we provided those opportunities, which the Biden administration said it is actively considering, then we will avoid having people come in caravans. This will help stabilize the southern border. So there are many other measures that we really need to be thinking about. And at Lawyers for Civil Rights, we are happy to work closely with many of the folks in this panel to make sure that we can provide free legal support to people of color, immigrants, and low-income people, and help address the immigration crisis. So thank you, Congresswoman, for providing us with this opportunity for dialogue.
Well, thank you, Yvonne. And we can't even imagine what you're going to do in your 40s with all those accolades for the work that you've already done. We're so thrilled to have you and grateful for your legal work and for your advocacy. And last, but certainly not least, I'd like to welcome my friend Mei Hung, Executive Director of the Chinese Cultural Connection in Malden. A native of Taiwan, Mei came to America to pursue higher education. Once in the United States, she developed a fascination with American culture while also maintaining a deep appreciation of her own Chinese heritage. At the Chinese Cultural Center, she has worked to use Chinese arts and culture as a conduit to inspire people from all backgrounds to come together to connect, understand, and appreciate each other. Mei earned her bachelor's degree from Bentley University and a master's in education and psychology from Tufts University. She has also studied Tai Chi for many years with world-renowned masters, which has informed her teaching at Boston University. Mei, it is great to have you here with us today. Please tell us more about your work to promote intercultural exchange and how important those cultural connections are as we work to shift the narrative around immigration at this critical moment. Mei, I think you're on mute.
Okay, great.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay, excellent. Well, first of all, I would like to thank you for including me, and I'm so honored and at the same time very inspired by listening to so many incredible advocates, activists, and have so much background and experience in advocating for the immigrants. Immigration policy and everything else. And I feel it's such an incredible topic to be discussed because, you know, American is really an immigrant country and we really strive with all the immigrants. And I feel that for the recent situation, it's just even more of a very incredible conversation that we have to discuss. But I want to first to also talk about what the organization we do. So the organization actually started in 1985, that we actually was a cultural organization, as I said, that we are promoting cultural understandings through the arts and culture to the schools, to the public libraries, to the museums and community center. But in 1999, that we were invited by former Mayor Richard Howard, to come to Malden because Malden has such increasing such an incredible, huge Asian population, and they wanted us to come to help them at the same time be a liaison of the community. So quickly, we become part of the fabric of the community, and within a couple of years, we created a program called East Meets West Cultural Dialogue to help the immigrant population to understand and appreciate American culture, and really to get connected and understand what's going on, and at the same time to relink to the community. But we also created a program for youth to help them to develop positive bicultural identity, and at the same time learning some skills about you know, how to help other people and about values and the importance of their social responsibility. So with all this program really help the people to connect. But recently, with this kind of dialogue that all the anti-Asian sentiment also come about, that reminds me of some recent years that I have some young people come to work with us or interning, and they've been talking about they were being a third generation. And I never really understand what does third generation mean. Meaning that because of the model minority put them in a very corner, they are not considered really fit into the model minority, and they feel so out of place. So they don't feel either they are Chinese or Americans or anything. So many have a really a very negative impact on their psyches. So they become really another issue. So with today, what this kind of situation, I think it has to do with that. What should we really help the young people to understand that, you know, we are all immigrants. We are come here with our own strength and allow us to do whatever they need to do without creating labels on each group. And so that we don't create some kind of resentment toward each other, because with this model minority that creating more resentment towards by other groups thinking that there is they are doing better, so therefore few more anti-Asian sentiment. I think that's one of the possibility. And I also feel that it is so important for the elected officials to really recognize the importance and the strength and the power that the immigrant population has really contributed to this country, and not to really label them as a bad or whatever situation. So each has the right ability to rise on their own course without being labeled in any particular circumstance. And I really agree with all the previous speakers about how we should really work together and allow the immigrant policy to make it more comfortable, more easy for the immigrant to fulfill their dreams. Without that, then this country has been weakened. And I remember personally, I have been through many times of immigration trying to get my visa, and I feel like I was being treated like criminals. And why should I be? You know, anyone who has taken the interest and want to come to this country to pursue their dreams, they want to contribute to this country. We should welcome them rather than treating them as criminals or they are here come to steal from anyone. And so that kind of attitude is very important for the people who are working with the immigrant, and how we can embrace each other so that we can have a much more peaceful and harmonious society for all of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, May. And May, thank you for your work here in Malden with a reach far beyond, and for putting together an incredible panel of your own on how we can all work to defeat anti-Asian hate and violence. And so grateful for all of you for being here. So I'm going to start with sort of a big question inspired by May's final point. As we continue to see the spread of hateful and dangerous rhetoric injected into the debate around immigration reform, how can we work together to shift the narrative around immigration and make sure that this country lives up to its promise of welcoming immigrants and providing opportunity for all? And if that wasn't a big enough question, I'm going to add in, especially in light of the pandemic, how do you think we can support our immigrant communities particularly? And we'll start with whoever would like to jump in.
This is Ivan. Maybe I can start because unfortunately I do have to drop off, Congresswoman. Sure. And what I wanted to say is the pandemic has really revealed longstanding inequities, not just along race and class lines, but also along immigration lines. Mm-hmm. Many people have contacted lawyers for civil rights saying, if I go to the hospital, will that be used against me? Will immigration penalize me because I got COVID or because I got the vaccine? And so people are worried. A lot of this comes from the Trump administration saying that if you use any public services, that you would become a public charge. Right. You mentioned, Congresswoman, that President Biden rescinded that policy. But on the ground, people still harbor that perception, that fear. And so that is contributing to people, for example, not taking advantage of benefits, not taking advantage of testing or vaccination even. And so I just want to put that out there, in that immigrants are very scared right now. And so I appreciate all of the work you've been doing to support the immigrant community, Congresswoman.
Well, thank you, Yvonne, and thank you for joining us. I know you have to run. We truly appreciate your work and sharing your expertise. Ava, do you have something to add?
Yes, so thank you. Again, the narrative is extremely important. And as we talk about, the hate, or as we talk about the rhetoric, we need to tell the story. I mean, our friend Jose's story or May's story, those are the stories that we need to focus on. One of the things I remember when President Obama was talking at an event, he said, if you have a story to tell, start with that. So yes, we talk in theory, we talk about the rhetoric, but lifting up what immigrants do, lifting up the story that May and Jose was talking about. I think, you know, the numbers and the statistics are important, but those statistics and numbers have been around, and the narrative is still not where it should be. So lifting up the stories, lifting up the spirits of our brothers and sisters who are very much part of who we are, I think, and being very disciplined about the language, because language does matter. So let's not repeat the hate. Let's not, you know, focus on what the negative rhetoric is, but lift up the spirits, lift up the stories of Jose and Maine and many others who are very much part of who we are, and then seeing all immigrants as part of us, not as us versus them.
So important. One community. Jose?
Yeah, no, thank you. I think it's a great question. And something I will probably add to what Eva was mentioning, and I think Ivan also was talking about, is the real stories. I think, you know, my experience comes from when I got organized 100% and focusing on organizing was in 2009, 2010, at the moment that we were building the campaign for Dream Act. And I remember we were learning about sharing stories, and some of our leaders, for sometimes they were say, you know, stories are good, but we need to talk to legislators about, you know, technicalities about how to move a legislation and why they should do it. Sometimes it's important, but I think the stories, I think we all agree now that the stories, the opposition usually highlight one bad story that happened somewhere in the country. I think there are millions of stories that will convince other people to see immigrants in a different way. I think there are millions of stories, and I think we all should work. I will probably highlight that one of the reasons why the TPS campaign has been kind of like successful is because TPS recipients has been taking some risk and has been moving in front and saying to our supporters, let's do this together. As a TPS recipients, we are willing to take the lead. Help us right next to us, not ahead, not behind, right next to each other. I think that's kind of like why I will probably say this campaign right now has been getting successful, because we have been working as a team and highlighting the importance. I think that every story is important. When there is a successful dreamer that is graduating from high level universities, there is also a successful mother and father who have been working 2-3 jobs to get that youth successful in their academy. I think that we need to combine those type of stories. The successful one, the successful business owner, but also the successful woman who's working and cleaning buildings, but raising their family to be a really, really good US citizen and very well prepared to continue building this country.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Jose. It's the power of those personal stories. And Margaret, you certainly have a powerful personal story. How have you seen your work change over the pandemic? And what would you like to see to help us change the narrative about immigrants in our communities?
One of the moments that was most touchful for me was a day that I went to deliver food for someone who was infected. And on the same household, a young man came to pick up the food. I was in my car, so I called him. He was my contact. And I said, you are not wearing a mask. You are not wearing gloves. And you are delivering food for someone who is infected. He said, I think I have COVID too. I'm infected too. We are all infected here, but we can't go to the hospital because we don't have health insurance. That was the worst and touchful moment for me. So for me right now, the first priority is to ensure vaccine access for all immigrants and low-income families that are having a very hard time to navigate the system. Second, I think we need to support local immigration organizations. They are providing support for the families, especially food support. We need to provide financial support for those organizations, for them to be able to continue their work. And third, we need to know that Biden government didn't forget us after the election. Until we achieve immigration reform, that will take a little longer. We need the government to act and take steps on things that do not require Congress approval, such all those backlog on immigration, all those processes that are taking very long. We need to speed that up. That will bring a relief, because every approval petition, every approval process means that a family is gonna be able to have access to healthcare, access to financial support from the government. I think those three actions would help us to really overcome the most difficult problems right now.
Thank you. That is a clear and immediate need list. Thank you, Margaret, and thank you for raising hunger. It has been such just a devastating story of this pandemic across communities, but especially in our immigrant community, whereas both, all of you have pointed out, there's so much fear about asking for help and the healthcare and the food services that people need and deserve. So May, we are gonna end with you. I'd love it if you would comment on any of the previous questions, or in particular, is there a way that the federal government can better coordinate with local organizations in order to better support our immigrant communities?
Yes, I think that education continues to be key to educate people to learn more about cultural issues, and from the very ground level, from elementary school students, to understand how inclusion is so important. We rely on each other. Nowadays, with this globalization, we cannot live without another. So therefore, respecting and understanding each other is really such an important ability to really navigate our whatever we need to do. So that's a key. That start from, we offer, after school program that could be part of the dialogue, or could be interracial dialogue. That is also important, because the communities, we also realize that the anti-Asian movement or the sentiment is really among many other people. We all have a little kind of a issues or misunderstanding with each other. And I feel that within groups, within government, to the community, to the nonprofit organization, and also supporting us to have a strong dialogue within each intercultural organization, where we can also get to understand each other and then support each other. After all, we all have a different strength, and no one can do it all. And coming together as a collective effort, then we can really maximize our potential and to create the best, most harmonious community. That's what I always hope. So we can all agree to disagree, but we share more in common than the differences. And I believe that tiny bit of differences is how we enrich each other. And if we can break through that, we have a perfect America. That's what I say. Thank you.
I can't think of a better way to end this conversation than that. And that's exactly it. This, by lifting up our immigrant communities, we are really lifting each other up and forming that more perfect union that we strive for. Thank you all for joining us for this conversation, for your work and your partnership and friendship. We look forward to continuing it as we continue our work to make sure that we are uplifting our immigrant communities and seeking justice and fairness. And thank you all for being tremendous advocates